what you want, when you want it, where you want it. This is The Mesh.
Hello and welcome to another episode of I Guess I'll Do It with Pat House, a podcast where I talk to comedians about comedy, why we do it, what got us into it, and all that shit. Today's guest, very funny guy, just released his latest special through Helium Productions. It's called Stupid Don't Get Tired, and it is available on YouTube. Today, my guest is the very funny Alonzo Bodden. What's up, man?
Hey, what's up, Pat? How you doing?
I'm doing very well. It's good to talk to you, man. It's been a couple years since you and I crossed paths, so thank you for swinging by here today.
Yeah, every special, whether we need to or not, we'll just throw a pandemic in between interviews, and here I am.
Absolutely. So I usually start off my podcast by recalling when me and my guest first met. And I don't know if you remember this, but I remember when we met as clear as day. It was about 10 years ago, 9 or 10 years ago, Atlantic City, Revel Casino. It was, yes. Revel Casino was $2.5 billion, with a B, $2.5 billion investment. And you, myself, and my very good friend, Philly comic Mary Radzinski, did opening night. This is the first comedy show they've ever had in this brand new casino. I was looking forward to this for 6 months out. And the night finally comes around, the room is packed, and I fucking ate shit. I remember that as clear as day. Mary hosted, I was in the middle, you were the headliner, and I just remember being like, that was my first foray into how nightmarish casino gigs can be.
Well, I'll tell you, you know why I remember that? That was the first gig after I had donated the kidney to my brother. I'd had the surgery. I don't know. See, you may not remember that.
I remember you opened with
like
that
a week before. Yeah, it was about a week or 10 days after the kidney surgery. And the funny thing about that casino, I remember that place. You had to take like 4 escalators to get from the street up to the casino. Like,
yes,
it was the most poorly designed. You know, casinos.
You're 100% right.
Engineering to it. And this place was hard to get to. It was just poorly designed. And the room was nice. The room was beautiful. I think that casino closed in like under 6 months. And I remember they had a big UFC fight there that night. I remember that because after the fight, all the restaurants in the casino were closed. And it was like, you know, when you have 10,000 people come to an event, you might want to feed them, might make a few dollars after. Yeah, I remember that casino did everything wrong, but the check did not bounce.
Yes, they did pay very well, even as the opener and middle act, which I did. They did pay well. It's so funny you remember so many things about that night, because I remember all of that as well. And I remember the room we were in was separated from the casino floor by a curtain. So I'm on stage and I fucking hear slot machines dinging and like cocktail waitresses. And I was like, this place is worth $2.5 billion and you can't put a wall over there.
Well, see, that's the thing that as a veteran, you've done everything before. See, now after that, you had done that. So the next casino you go to where there's only a curtain, you're ready.
You're prepared.
My crappy casino training was up in the Pacific Northwest. I don't know, mid 90s when they had the Indian casinos everywhere, and Pat Wilson had a circle of casinos you do in Washington and Oregon, and that was the first place I heard of penny slots. You would be on stage in like a lounge, and people are playing penny slots outside, and they're ringing, and it's like, how much are you winning? How much are you?
I know.
You're all this noise, no show, and you just won $8.
I was going to say max bet on a penny slot has got to be like $5 tops.
But that's how you learn, right? You do that, and then you're like, okay, I got this. I know how to work casinos, because there's a hell of a lot of casino gigs they consider the comedy show like it's something to throw in the bar. So they put it in a lounge with no walls, and you're lucky if you have curtains. Sometimes you don't have curtains, and people just walk by. They're like, "Hey, look at the clown! What's he doing?"
It's funny you say that because that was a learning point. That was my first time doing a gig like that, and it has happened since. And it's like, all right, I already know what to do here. This may suck, but I know how to navigate this better. And it's funny. I'm glad you remember all that stuff from that night too, like the kidney thing, the UFC fight, the restaurants. I remember all of that too. Like as comedians,
Pat, I kind of remember donating a kidney. Yeah. That stays with you.
As comedians, we do literally thousands and thousands and thousands of shows, and I love when you can just pinpoint a specific one and remember 55 things about it. Because, so I remember you. Like right before I started doing stand-up, right as I started doing stand-up, you were on Last Comic Season 2, correct?
Right. I did 2 and 3.
2 and 3, because 3 was like 1 verse 2, Season 1 verse Season 2 or something, right? Yeah, Okay, cool. I remember that, and I remember being a fan of yours since way back then because I was obsessed with stand-up right before I started it, and then like I would watch Last Comic Standing every single week, and I loved it. And I remember everybody who was on Season 1 and 2 and all that stuff. So you were a pivotal point of me watching a lot of stand-up right before I started. So
well, thank you. Yeah,
man.
That was it was a great run. It was a lot of fun. It was somewhat nerve-wracking, but it was incredibly fun to be in primetime TV every week. That was probably the best part of doing the show.
And that was the first time. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say the recognition was huge, and the only thing that changed over the years, what we joke about, those of us who did the first few seasons, is there was no social media back then, right? So we walked away with tens of thousands of MySpace friends. That's what we had. Later on, it went to Twitter. It went to Facebook and then to Twitter, but when we did it, we had message boards and MySpace. So that part was funny, but yeah, it was a good experience.
It's cool. And wasn't that the first reality show that like actually featured stand up? It had to have been, right?
Yeah. That was the first one. Well, other than like Star Search had the stand up category.
Yes.
But that was the first show that was all comedians.
That was so pivotal for me because like at the time there was like I was watching some comedians on Comedy Central, but with the Last Comic Standing, some of the comics were a little more unknown. I was like, okay, this looks like an attainable goal. These people are like working, not struggling comics, but they're working the grind too. So it was cool to see like, instead of watching Chris Rock or Brian Regan or whoever, it was cool to see the comics that were working the clubs, which is what I was fascinated with at the time.
Yeah, they learned as the show kind of evolved. So the first season, the season with that fan won with Ralphie May and
that fan beat out Ralphie May.
Yeah, it was who was it? Ralphie May and Rich Voss and a few other, and there were some other comics. The first season they had a rule that you couldn't have done the Tonight Show, you couldn't have done any half-hour or 1 hour specials or whatever, and they really had a lot of new comics on. And what they found out was new comics weren't ready for TV because you burn a lot of material when you're doing TV. So the second season, the season I went on, that was when they said, okay, it's open to anybody. And they pushed us as all being new comics. They wanted the audience to believe we had just wandered in off the street, but we were all veterans. We'd all been doing it 8, 10, 12 years, So, and you have to have some time under your belt before you hit TV like that. But for me, it was the perfect show at the perfect point in my career.
Oh, that's awesome. See, I was on both sides of this coin. It may have been season 2. I don't remember. I did an open call Last Comic Standing audition at Caroline's. I camped out overnight. I was the jackass in line with 500 people. And I had a 30-second audition and they were like, nope. which totally understandable. But then 3 or 4 years later, I had a Last Comic Standing audition, and they were like, well, you're kind of already placed in the second round because it was me and 10 other Philly comics that they liked and trusted. We were all hosts and features at the time. So that's when I was like, oh, I see what they're doing. They do need people that kind of know, that have a feel for it.
Yeah, there were a lot of people that had a beef that we didn't have to wait in line. Like we had to do the daytime audition. I think it was a minute or 2 minutes or something like that. Yeah, I think it was 2 minutes. And then if they pick you, you go to the nighttime show and do 5 minutes. But some people waited in line, and we had appointments. Like they told me, be there between 2 and 3 or 1 and 2 or whatever. And we were like, hey, we earned this appointment.
Yeah.
Like I've been grinding this for 10 years. So yeah, that's the only break I get over you, is that I don't have to wait. And Jay London was the only guy who had walked up, waited in line, and made the show.
No kidding.
Yeah. But he might have already been living out there. We really weren't sure. He might have been just...
One of the hardest things in stand-up is doing a 2-minute set. I've done it for auditions, and I've done sets on like radio before years and years ago in comedy competitions, but it is so much easier to do 1 hour than it is to do 2 minutes. So much easier.
Well, for me, I do setup punch. Like that's kind of my style, so I can do it. But early on, Jamie Masada, who runs the Laugh Factory, he has 3-minute auditions for the club. And he said something that always stuck with me. He said, if you can't be funny in 3 minutes, you won't be funny for 20. And I was like, okay,
No,
yeah, get to the point.
Get to the point is absolutely correct. I have a mix of that kind of stuff in my act. I do have shorter stuff that I open with, but I'm trying to get more and more into storytelling. So I do, you're not going to open a show with an 8-minute story. So I do the quicker stuff up front, then I ease into that stuff. But and also when if you are a setup punch type of comic and everything, and you have 2 minutes, it's so hard to narrow down what you want to do. Do you stick on one topic the whole time? Or do you do 12 different jokes and the whole thing is scattered,
That's one of the tricks, picking the topics. And I was a judge for, I think, season 5. And one of the things that happened with a lot of great comics is they picked the wrong material for like that given night and that given show. And that therefore they didn't make it, to the next round. And it was like, that's kind of a toss up. You just never know when you do stuff like that. But yeah, you got to, I always tell people, to me, it's like the highlights. I'm like, yeah, this is like being on Sports Center. I can't show you the whole game. I can't do the whole set. I can do the highlights from 3 different bits in 2 minutes, And the storytellers, I tell you, the great storytellers, that story is a series of jokes. Like there's a bunch of laughs within the story and then maybe a big one at the end. And you can make that work. You just, like say, you just learn with TV, right? You just learn, you got to trim the fat. You don't have the luxury of a club where you could just think out loud and throw in tags and this and that.
Yeah,
on TV,
and riff and
have tight.
Yep, it has to be super tight. So you just recorded your latest special at Helium in Philadelphia, which is my home club. That is my home. They have been very, very good to me over the years, and I wanted to go that night, but I was out of town doing something else. But how was that whole experience recording that latest special in Philadelphia?
It was great. Yeah. So it was a great idea that, Mark had, that we record these shows and then release them in clips, right? Because now everything is a clip, TikTok, Instagram Live, whatever it is. So he was like, we'll record a set and then 2-minute spot here, 3-minute, 5-minute here, leading up to releasing the whole special on YouTube, which is what we've done now. And it's a good idea. I mean, the response on TikTok was so big that I had to start a TikTok account. Like I had never gone on TikTok. Listen, Pat, I'm too old to be looking at 12-year-olds twerking. I ain't going to jail because of social media. So I just kind of stayed away from TikTok. And then people actually were calling and messaging me saying, man, you are blowing up on TikTok right now. I have a bit in the special called Stupid Don't Get Tired that somehow people related to because, stupid don't get tired. So
it's a great line. It's 100% true. It's funny. I just joined TikTok as well. I was. Do you know Ted Alexandro?
Absolutely. Brilliant guy.
Brilliant. One of my favorite comics, and we've been very good buddies for a lot of years now. We were just together at the Stress Factory in New Brunswick, New Jersey, not too long ago, and we were talking about TikTok. And I said to Ted, I'm 37 years old, almost 38. I do not want to join TikTok. And Ted looked right at me and said, I'm 53 and just joined. And I'm like, shit, can't argue that. Cannot argue that. So
yeah, I mean, it's where the audience is. I don't know if you know Liz Mealy.
Yep.
She's a friend of mine out of New York.
Yep.
And she, like, way back when, told me, you got to get on TikTok. You got to start putting videos out, you know. And it's not really my thing. I'm fortunate now I have someone who helps me with that, who's really good with it. You know, this is the funny thing about social media, right? Anyone can tell you they're a social media expert. And if you don't know anything, you believe them, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh,
yeah.
okay. And then you find out a week later, you don't know any more about this than I do. You have no idea what you're doing. But I found someone to help me who really knows it. And they've been great. With
I
cutting
have
up
helped
the videos,
too.
Getting them out there. You have to.
I have helped because I'm not geared that way. I just want to do stand up. I don't want to have a full-time job browsing social media. But the whole game has evolved. It's like, it's just fucking wild.
Well, it's where it is now, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, unless you get a Netflix, special or Netflix deal, you got to put it out yourself on social media, because that's just because everyone else, you know what they're waiting for? They're waiting for you to show up with followers from social media, right? We were talking about this last night, that now when you go in for a meeting, the first thing they ask you is, how many followers do you have? And I'm like, my cult is growing.
It was just, I've said that before. It sounds culty. It sounds like, come over here for a second, buddy. Like it's almost like Scientology or something.
Yeah. Except it does make movie stars, so I guess it is like Scientology.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed recording your special in Philly. I mean, I'm biased, but the Philly Helium is definitely one of my favorite clubs. It's my home club. All 3 of my albums were recorded there, so I just absolutely love everything about that room. It's where I cut my teeth. It's where I got to work with my favorite comics, even some who are no longer with us. So I like hearing that other headliners, love that club as well.
Well, it's got the comedy club vibe.
It does. Low ceilings
to make a comedy club work. Low ceilings. It's wider than it is deep. Mm-hmm. People are on top of you, so you can feel the energy. A small stage right in the middle. Yeah, it's designed for comedy, and it works. And Philly crowds are, they're good crowds. Philly people have a great sense of humor. You have to, right? Because Philly's a tough city. Whenever you're in a tough city, the people have a great sense of humor. They don't have time to feel sorry for people. They're laughing.
That's what I would. Okay, like my first couple years in stand-up, I remember meeting comics from like other cities, and people were always like, "Is Philly a rough town to do comedy?" And I'm like, "No, I love doing stand-up here." I think people were like afraid to do stand-up here, or thought Philly was like, you just get booed, or crowds are vicious and like standoffish. I don't think that's the case at all. But I mean,
Pat,
yes,
you guys do boo and throw stuff at Santa Claus. So the reputation is not undeserved.
You saw the Bill Burr thing, right? From 15 years ago. Oh my God, that was the funniest thing in Philadelphia comedy history.
Yeah, that was great.
So where did your career begin?
I started in LA because I didn't know I wasn't supposed to, and yeah, that was the whole thing. It's like, oh, I'm not supposed to study here, because the tough thing about starting in LA is it's impossible to get stage time, right? Because you're literally, especially this is back in the early 90s when LA was a place for comedy. New York is now, but LA was back then. So you literally had the best comics in the world, dropping in and doing the clubs. And there's only 3 clubs in LA. It's not like New York where they got 8 or 10, A-list clubs. So anyway, started there, getting up anywhere I could, bowling alleys, bookstores.
Yep, done them all.
Coffee shops, all of that stuff. And one of my good breaks early was I Jamie Masada hired me as a doorman at the Laugh Factory. And he was like, if comics are late or comics don't show up, I'll put you up on stage. So that got me time on the best stage in town, one of the best stages in town. And
That's
then
awesome.
a guy named Fraser Smith had a show called Fraser Smith After Midnight. It was a Friday night midnight comedy radio show, one of the hottest shows in town. Everybody would be there, like all the A-list comics, but also you might have two of the Lakers hanging out there with 5 porn stars and Ron Jeremy, who we didn't know what the hell he was. And, but anyway, it was just a real hang. It was like a big rock and roll station. So Fraser saw me one night and he said, hey, you want to open the show? And he hired me to open the radio show every week. So the great thing about that was I had to come up with 5 new minutes every week. Got to do it in front of a packed house at the Laugh Factory.
Oh, wow. 5 minutes every week is a work. It's a project.
It made me a writer. It was good for me because I learned you got to write and you got to write quick. And so, yeah, that was a good job. That was a good gig.
What was stand-up like in the early 90s? Because the boom had just ended, like the big boom that everybody talks about of the 80s.
That's what it was. So it was this, Heffron and I joke about it all the time. We started in this lost period where we were too late for Johnny Carson, right? Because Johnny made the stars in the 80s.
Yep.
And we were too early for YouTube, So
that's really funny. It's true.
Yeah. When I started, Def Jam was the biggest thing in comedy. That was when Def Jam was on HBO, #1 show. That was tough for me because I wasn't the stereotypical black comic. Mm-hmm. So they were looking for Def Jam comics and I wasn't that, although I got nothing but love from the black comics and the comics in that world. The audiences, maybe not as much. But, it was still work. The guys who I used to watch and learn from in that period. Oh, another big thing in that period was Living Color. Living Color was huge. So as a matter of fact, one of my first road gigs was opening for Tommy Davidson. I opened for Tommy for about 6 months. And that was definitely, an education. But the guys who I would see all the time at the factory were guys like George Wallace, George Lopez, Dom Herrera.
I know Wayans. Dom very well. Dom is...
Yeah, Dom's great.
Yep, great guy.
Damon would be there all the time. Brett Damon. Butler. Why am I blanking on her name? Cheryl Underwood. I see Cheryl Underwood all the time. So those were the people, like that was the generation I was watching. But George Wallace used to tell me all the time, he's like, man, you're good. You missed it. You'd have made a lot of money in the 80s. And he's like, I made a lot of money. You would have made a lot of money, but you didn't make no money. But I got money. George likes to remind me of that.
I love George Wallace, man. He also has like one of my favorite Twitter accounts. I mean, I could read his posts all day. He's phenomenal on Twitter.
When you talk about social media, he figured it out right away. He figured out Twitter, like how to be funny in 140 characters. And we were saying this is when you've mastered something. When everyone who tweets back at you quotes you and so forth. You like everyone puts that down on his tweets because he made that so big. George is great. And so that's what it was like in the 90s. It was learning from everyone who made it big in the 80s. My big break came at Just for Laughs in Montreal. That was one of the things that still went. Just for Laughs back then was much bigger.
Yes.
Because we didn't have an internet, right? There was no internet. So when you were a new face at Just for Laughs, you really were a new face. You really, like, people hadn't seen you, some people in the business knew who you were, but they hadn't seen you. So that was the big intro party. That was the big, look at him and look at her. And that was my big thing. I got a deal up there and I quit the day job and, knock wood, haven't had to find one since.
All right, 2 questions. What was the day job?
Oh, I had a number of them. So my first career was in aerospace. I was an airplane mechanic. Started training airplane mechanics. Loved making them laugh. I always had a sense of humor, but I'd never been in front of people until I started teaching. So after about 2 years of doing that was when I said, "Hey, man, I want to try stand up." And I was getting laid off, and I took this comedy writing class. I did the graduation, the 5 minutes, was absolutely hooked. I got laid off, and I kind of made a promise to myself that I wasn't going to work on airplanes again, right? Because if I went back to making that kind of money, I might not have, gone all in on stand up. So I just doing odd jobs, this and that. And then a buddy calls me. He says, "Hey, you could drive a U-Haul, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." He said, "All right, same as a camera truck. I got a job for you on this new kids show called Power Rangers."
No shit.
So I started driving a truck for Power Rangers. I became the transportation captain, so kind of second in command of, trucks and trailers moving stuff around. And the producer, a guy named Jonathan Traco. I always remember Jonathan because they came to one of my shows, some of the people for the crew. And he was like, "Hey, man, you're good at this. You really like it. You'll always have a job here." So I could go on the road and do whatever and then come back. I didn't have to work every day. I only worked days when we were on location, but it paid enough money to pay my bills, to live my
Yeah.
life. And I didn't have to be there every day, and they were supportive of what I did. So that was the day job. The other great thing about doing that job was I learned everything about production by watching. Like, I always tell people that at the end of the movie, when you see all those credits and you're like, "What the hell is a gaffer? What's a best boy? What's it?" That
Mhm.
I learned what all of those jobs were, what everybody does in production. So not only was it a good day job in the sense of paying my bills, it also gave me an education about production. And then the ultimate thing that came out of it, I'm getting craft service one day, and the sound guy's like, "Wow, you got a voice. You want to be a monster?" And I was like, "Hell yeah." And I ended up doing monster voices for the show for a couple of years.
No kidding. That's awesome. I love that. First of all, that's a really cool story. But secondly, I love the fact that you just said you learned everything about production by just watching, because there's no better way to learn anything. I used to work in the box office at Helium during the day. Just like you, another comic that worked at the comedy club. I worked in the box office for years, and then I would hang around after my shift and watch the show. I wouldn't talk to anybody. I would just sit in the back and watch every headliner every week. Dave Attell, Maria Bamford, I can name everybody. There's no better learning tool than just sitting, shutting up, and watching.
I will say that Tommy gave me some good advice about that, because when I started, it was the end of TV shows, right? So every club had a TV show. Like the Laugh Factory had Comic Strip Live, and the Improv had A&E at the Improv, and stuff like that.
I just changed my shirt. I was wearing my Evening at the Improv shirt this morning.
So people would hang out, and they would hang out at the Improv at the bar and stuff. And Tommy said to me one time, he said, "Listen, you'll learn more going out to Riverside and doing 20 minutes yourself than watching me at the Improv." So I would balance it. I would watch people now and then, but I was more concerned with getting my own stage time anywhere I could.
Mm-hmm.
I remember Gabe Iglesias, right?
Yep.
Fluffy.
Fluffy. Oh yeah.
We're doing this little casino called the Bicycle Club. It's in East LA. We get paid $50 a night plus food, which was a great gig. You actually got paid. And this giant fat kid bounces on stage in Hawaiian shirt and shorts. And it's like a 10-year-old inviting everyone to play. He's doing these funny voices. And we were all like, "Wow, who is this kid?" And I will tell you something he had from day one. People loved him. He had this lovability about him. And it was really, I mean, nobody could predict his success being as massive as it is. But we
Dodger
also
Stadium
knew,
last month. Month.
We also knew, though, there's no stopping this kid, because he was fun, he was funny, and he had that lovability. But yeah, that's how it was starting out. It was working, all over town, and when you were lucky, getting a spot at an A club.
I know that feeling, man. When you get called up to the big leagues for your first paid spot or paid weekend, there's nothing like it.
Yeah.
I mean, it does get better, but it's also like eye-opening and life-changing when you're like, oh my God, the club is going to pay me to be here this weekend.
Yeah. And another thing that would happen with me that was really cool is I became the guy who would headline Thursday and Sunday and then feature for the big act Friday and Saturday.
Hey, I'm that guy. I'm that guy right now. I am that guy right now. But I mean, I like it. I mean, I'm not a name that's going to sell out tickets the whole entire weekend. So I'll get Thursday or I'll get Sunday. Numbers will be all right. But then I have a blast featuring for whoever on the weekend, and it's a good time. Then you can just hammer out the greatest hits and get a good video for TikTok. So it all works out,
I still listen. What was it last year? No, it's funny how we got to adjust for COVID time, right? So you think something was last year, but it was actually 2.5 years ago.
That is true.
Before Wanda did her last Netflix special, and this is another thing that's happened in my career. I always get bumped for a bigger name black comic. Always. I'll be like, oh, I'm booked at the Improv. Oh, well, see, Wanda wants to come in. Oh, the Damon's coming in, whatever. So it's always fun. It is what it is. But they said, hey, Wanda's coming in, but you can feature for her. Let me tell you something, Pat. I wish I could have that job the rest of my life. Being the opening act for Wanda Sykes is the most fun, easiest thing you could do in comedy. You got this huge crowd, hot as can be because they love Wanda, and I only got to do 20. I was like, can I do this forever? And they were like, get the hell out of here. Go back to work.
Early in my career, Nick DiPaolo told me, stay in the feature spot forever. Like, I always think of him saying that. It's not a bad spot. No, it really is the sweet spot. You don't have to open. You don't have to close. You get 20 to 25 to do whatever you want, and you're done. There's like almost zero work involved. No opening, no closing, no announcements.
Yeah. Dennis Blair spent his whole career opening for Carlin. Not a bad spot.
Yeah. I've been lucky enough Sebastian took me around for a while, Tom Segura. I mean, when you're in front of those primed and ready theater crowds, dude, it's like walking on air. But then again,
yeah.
A theater gig will throw you on your ass here and there. And, nothing wrong with being grounded. Kind of makes, brings you down a couple pegs.
Yeah. I mean, whenever something doesn't work, you're reminded of what this is about and doing the work. Sorry, I keep moving. I'm trying to stay centered on this camera.
Don't worry about it because we only pull the audio, so don't even worry about it.
Yeah. It's a weird ass hotel setup.
Where are you speaking to me again from?
I am in Martha's Vineyard.
Okay.
I don't know. Are you in Martha's Vineyard or on Martha's Vineyard? I'm really not sure.
I want to say on.
Yeah, I think I'm on Martha's Vineyard, and they do a full comedy series here through July and August, and
cool.
Every week they have a different comic in. So this is my first time doing it, but it's cool, fun gig.
Now, are you at a club? Where are you?
They have they converted a movie theater, and that's where they do
cool.
it. So yeah,
that can
nice.
be a real.
I think it's a 300 seat.
Oh, nice. And do you have a show every night this week? Or is it just a Thursday to Saturday type deal?
No, this is the funny thing. It's Monday to Friday.
Oh.
Isn't that weird? It's Monday to Friday.
Kind of weird.
They said the reason they do that is because on the weekends, big music acts come in. So they found that there's no sense competing when, some big R&B show or whatever comes in. So they take Monday to Friday, and then Saturday and Sunday they shut down and music comes to the island. I mean, because it's a small vacation island, right? So people, there's only limited number of people, and if there's if I pick a name in music is here, then they're like, well, we're not going to sell any comedy tickets because Shaka Khan's doing a show, and so they got a good it works out.
So this goes back 15 years. I was trying to host at this club in central Pennsylvania called Stitches. It was at Lancaster, and it was definitely a B room, but they got good people coming through. So I spent years and years emailing, just trying to get a hosting week. I want to get my in the door. I want them to see my face. I want them to, working. I get my first weekend at Stitches. It's a Friday, Saturday. Bill Cosby is across the street. Both nights, Friday and Saturday. Our shows had nobody. Like, who are you going to go see? Bill Cosby or these three unknown comics in this hotel lobby across the street. And the second time I went back to do that club, Friday and Saturday, who was across the street? Ringo Starr, a fucking Beatle. So I'm glad they're separating. I'm glad they have the wherewithal to separate the comedy from the big music acts.
My favorite moment like that, I was doing a place out by Palm Springs called the Fantasy Springs Casino. And they had a comedy club in the casino. And you know who was in the arena behind the casino? Chris Rock. I told the 25 people who came to see me, I said, listen, even I would rather go see Chris Rock.
Exactly.
How don't we all just go out back?
I would have said the exact same thing. So you were just in Montreal last week, right?
Yeah.
Nice.
Last few weeks. I did 2.5 weeks. I host a show. It used to be called The Ethnic Show. Now it's called Just for the Culture. But it's one of the more popular shows, so it actually starts before the festival. So it's like I live in Montreal for the month of July.
Okay. So what is the what's the show about? What's the theme of the?
Well, it's just that it's for the culture. So like they have different ethnic groups. We had Jessica Kirsten. She joked. She's like, I'm the Jew. And we had Giannis Pappas. We had Dave Merhej, who's an Arab guy. Zainab Johnson, Muslim woman, black Muslim.
Yeah,
woman.
this is a fucking killer lineup.
Yeah. It's Shang Wang, really funny Asian guy out of LA.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the show. And they do it every year and they mix up the comics. It's funny how this has grown over the years with JFL. Like back when I started JFL, they had the Uptown Show, which was, their way of saying the black comedy show.
Mm-hmm.
And then they had the Bar Mitzvah Show, which was the Jewish show. And then they had the Wise Guys, which was the Italian show. And then they kind of combined all of that into the ethnic show. And what happened, they had a premiere of Quebec or something like that. A far right winger who was using it as a insult, like the ethnics are coming and the ethnic this and ethnic that. So they changed the name of the show to Just for the Culture.
Sounds like an awesome idea. I mean, and that's such a killer lineup. No, is it the same lineup every night you guys do it? Or does it switch up each night?
Every year it's a different lineup, but the same lineup for the run of the festival.
Cool. Yeah.
We did 19 shows. So yeah,
damn.
We do a lot.
That is a lot. How much time does everybody do?
20.
Perfect. That's absolutely perfect.
Wait, no, is it 20? No, I'm sorry. It's 12. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Even shorter. 12. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you head to after Martha's Vineyard?
Home for a few weeks, and then I'm going to Vegas. I'm doing Brad Garrett's club at the MGM. That's another guy who, big name comic, his love of comedy has led to him having probably the best club in Vegas. They definitely, no club in Vegas treats the comics better than Brad does. It's really a cool spot. He moved into a new club in the MGM, so I haven't been to the new club yet. But
I haven't either. I've been to the old one, and yeah, man, that place is really nice.
Yeah, and Brad loves comedy. I mean, at that end of the day, he loves stand-up, so he made sure that everything was good for the comics.
That's awesome, man. That's great to hear. What else do you have on tap for the rest of the year? Anything good coming up that you're looking forward to?
Yeah. Actually, there's a few things. So, Wait, Don't Tell Me is an NPR comedy news show that I do. Comes on Saturday or Sunday mornings on NPR. And we're doing a comedy tour. We have a bunch of comics who were regular panelists, Maz Jobrani, Tom Papa, Maeve Higgins, just a bunch of comics who do the show. So we're doing a comedy tour where we'll have different comics from the show, 3 at a time, and I'm hosting the tour. I'm hosting all the spots. So we're bouncing around the country doing that. That'll be my main gig from September through December.
Oh, that's awesome. Are you making a stop through Philadelphia?
Right now, no, we don't have it. We'll probably get there next year.
Okay.
I know we're doing Michigan, we're doing Seattle and Portland, we're doing Dallas, Austin. Like we do multiple nights close together. You know,
yeah, of course.
I think we have Atlanta and somewhere, and then like Charlotte, Raleigh. You know, so that's the year.
Very cool, man. Well, I hope the listeners come out and support that tour. That's going to be awesome. Anything else you want to plug before we wrap it up here, man?
Obviously the special.
The new special.
Don't Get Tired. Please go to Helium Comedy and check that out. And then just, AlonzoBodden.com is a website and has all my dates on it. I'm just about back to pre-pandemic levels of busy. I still don't know if that's good or bad, but that's.
I'll definitely take it as good because that's how I'm looking at it.
Yeah, I'll be honest. It had been 25 years since I'd been home, the way I was home during the pandemic, and I'm not going to lie and say that I didn't enjoy the quiet at times. I got a dog. I got a giant pandemic puppy, Great Dane. It's like some days it's just like rather hang out with my dog than go to work. And I'm reminded, in order to feed the dog, I got to go to work. So here I am.
Where is home for you? Are you still LA based?
LA. Yeah.
Oh,
LA
nice. Nice. Well, dude, Alonzo, it was great talking to you, man. It was great catching up. Thank you for being here. Join us. Thank you, man. Alonzo Bodden, everybody. Alonzo,
cool podcast. Thank you.
You've been listening to The Mesh, an online media network of shows and programs ranging from business to arts, sports to entertainment, music to community. All programs are available on the website as well as through iTunes and YouTube. Check us out online at themesh.tv. Discover other network shows and give us feedback on what you just heard.